Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Speak English Fluently. I'm Emma, and today we're going to slow everything down and talk deeply about one speaking method that has quietly helped many learners move from understanding English to actually speaking it with confidence. This episode is not about motivation or quick tips. It's about understanding how a method works inside your brain so that when you practice it, you know why it feels difficult at first and why it eventually starts to feel natural.
Hi everyone, I'm James. The reason this topic matters so much is that many learners already know a lot of English. They can understand videos, podcasts, and conversations, yet when they try to speak, everything slows down. Shadowing focuses exactly on that gap between knowing English and using English in real time.
Many learners describe the same frustration. They say they understand what others say, but when it's their turn to speak, their mind goes blank or they start translating in their head. This experience can make learners doubt themselves, even though the problem is not intelligence or effort.
That happens because listening and speaking are often trained separately. You can train listening passively for years without ever training your speaking reaction speed. Shadowing connects listening and speaking and forces your brain to process English in the same way real conversations demand.
Let's clearly explain what shadowing actually means. Shadowing is the practice of listening to English audio and speaking along with it almost at the same time, staying just a little behind the speaker so that your brain is listening, processing meaning, and producing sound simultaneously.
It's also important to explain what shadowing is not. It is not listening first and repeating later. It is not memorizing sentences. And it is not translating what you hear into your native language before speaking, because translation slows your thinking and blocks fluency.
When you shadow correctly, your brain doesn't have time to translate or analyze grammar rules. It must react immediately in English. At first, this feels uncomfortable and messy, and many learners think they are failing because they cannot keep up perfectly.
That uncomfortable feeling is actually a sign that real training is happening. When your brain is slightly overwhelmed, it is building new pathways, and those pathways are exactly what allow faster and more natural speaking later.
One of the biggest habits that slows down speaking is overthinking. Learners worry about grammar accuracy, pronunciation, and mistakes while speaking, and this mental pressure blocks natural flow.
Shadowing removes overthinking because there is no time to analyze. Your brain learns to focus on rhythm, meaning, and movement instead of correctness, which is how fluent speakers actually communicate.
Over time, something important changes. English stops feeling like a problem you need to solve sentence by sentence. Instead, it starts feeling like a tool you can use to express ideas, even if it's not perfect.
That shift is what many learners describe as fluency. It's not about speaking without mistakes. It's about speaking without fear, hesitation, or long pauses.
Before starting shadowing, choosing the right audio is extremely important. Many learners struggle with shadowing not because the method is weak, but because the material they choose is too fast or too complex.
Beginners and lower intermediate learners should choose slow, clear speech, simple conversations, or learner podcasts. The goal is not vocabulary growth, but training rhythm, reaction speed, and confidence.
Intermediate learners can slowly move to more natural conversations, interviews, or discussions, as long as the speakers are clear and not rushing through sentences.
Before shadowing, it helps to listen to the audio once or twice without speaking. This allows your brain to understand the topic, context, and overall flow before adding speaking pressure.
During this listening stage, don't stop to analyze grammar or vocabulary. Just listen calmly and let your ears get used to the sound patterns of English.
When you begin shadowing, speak out loud. Your mouth and tongue need physical training just like muscles. Silent practice feels safe, but it does not prepare you for real conversations.
At the beginning, you will miss words and fall behind. This is completely normal. The mistake many learners make is stopping the audio every time something goes wrong.
Shadowing is about continuity, not perfection. Even if you lose a few words, keep going. Real conversations do not pause, and shadowing prepares you for that reality.
Another major benefit of shadowing is rhythm. English has a natural rhythm, and shadowing helps you feel it instead of memorizing pronunciation rules that are hard to apply in real time.
By copying native speakers repeatedly, your brain naturally learns stress, intonation, and connected speech without conscious effort, which grammar books cannot teach.
Learners often ask how long they should practice shadowing each day, and many assume they need long hours to see results.
In reality, even 10 to 20 minutes of focused shadowing can be extremely effective if done consistently. Consistency matters far more than long, irregular practice sessions.
Repeating the same audio for several days may feel boring at first, but repetition is where confidence is built. Each repetition reduces fear and hesitation.
Many learners are surprised when they notice that after a few days, the same audio feels smoother and easier, even though nothing else has changed.
Shadowing also improves listening deeply. When your mouth learns to produce English sounds, your ears become more sensitive to fast, natural speech.
This is why many learners suddenly feel that native speakers sound clearer after weeks of shadowing, even though they didn't consciously study listening.
Confidence grows slowly through this process. Speaking English stops feeling scary because you practice reacting instead of thinking.
Over time, English stops feeling like a foreign language you must control carefully and starts feeling like something familiar you can use freely.
This is the moment many learners realize they are no longer just studying English, but actually using it.
And this change doesn't come from memorizing more words or grammar rules. It comes from training your brain to respond naturally through repetition.
Shadowing will not make you fluent overnight, and it's important to be realistic about that.
But with regular practice, you will notice clear improvements in speed, comfort, and confidence, and those improvements build on each other over time.
Mistakes will still happen, but shadowing removes fear, and without fear, learning becomes much faster and more enjoyable.
When fear disappears, speaking becomes less stressful and more natural, which keeps learners consistent over the long term.
This is why shadowing is more than a technique. It's a mindset shift from perfection to communication.
Communication is not about sounding perfect. It's about expressing ideas clearly enough to connect with people.
When learners truly understand this, they stop blocking themselves mentally and allow progress to happen naturally.
And that natural progress is what eventually leads to real fluency.
One important thing learners often misunderstand is the role of mistakes during shadowing practice. Many people believe that making mistakes means they are reinforcing bad habits, but in reality, mistakes are a natural and necessary part of training your speaking reflexes and reaction speed.
Exactly. When you shadow, the goal is not to sound perfect. The goal is to stay connected to the flow of English. Even if some words come out unclear or incorrect, your brain is still learning how to keep moving forward instead of stopping.
This is especially important for learners who freeze when they speak. Shadowing trains you to continue speaking even when your sentence doesn't come out exactly as planned, which is a skill you need in real conversations.
In real life, native speakers don't stop talking every time they make a small mistake. They adjust naturally and keep going, and shadowing helps learners develop that same flexibility and confidence.
Another helpful mindset is to think of shadowing as physical training, not intellectual study. Just like you don't analyze every muscle when you exercise, you shouldn't analyze every word when you shadow.
That's a great comparison. Shadowing trains your speaking muscles and your brain's timing. The improvement happens gradually, often without you noticing it day by day.
Many learners also ask whether shadowing should be done with difficult material to challenge themselves more. This is where patience becomes very important.
Using material that is too difficult often creates frustration instead of progress. Shadowing works best when the content is challenging enough to push you slightly, but easy enough to keep you moving forward smoothly.
Another question we hear often is whether shadowing should replace other types of practice, like grammar study or vocabulary learning.
Shadowing doesn't replace everything. Instead, it complements other learning. Grammar and vocabulary give you knowledge, while shadowing turns that knowledge into usable speaking ability.
Over time, learners who practice shadowing regularly often notice that they hesitate less, respond faster, and feel calmer when speaking English in real situations.
That calm feeling is very important. When speaking stops feeling stressful, learners become more willing to speak, and that willingness accelerates progress naturally.
Shadowing can also be adapted to different goals. Some learners use it to improve daily conversation, while others use it to prepare for presentations, interviews, or professional communication.
No matter the goal, the principle remains the same. You are training your brain to process and produce English at the same time, without fear or hesitation.
It's also worth mentioning that shadowing doesn't require special tools or expensive courses. All you need is audio you can understand, a quiet space, and the willingness to practice regularly.
Consistency is the real secret. Even short daily practice creates better results than long sessions done only once in a while.
Many learners feel impatient because progress doesn't always feel dramatic. Shadowing often creates quiet improvement rather than sudden breakthroughs.
But if learners look back after a few weeks or months, they usually realize that speaking feels easier, faster, and more natural than before.
This is why it's important to trust the process instead of constantly changing methods or doubting yourself.
Language learning is not a race. It's a gradual process, and methods that reduce stress and build confidence are the ones that last.
Another powerful effect of shadowing is that it helps learners develop a natural sense of sentence structure without consciously thinking about grammar rules.
Through repeated exposure and imitation, your brain starts to recognize patterns automatically, which makes speaking feel smoother and more organized.
Learners who shadow regularly often say that English starts appearing in their thoughts more naturally, without translation.
And that shift, from translating to thinking directly in English, is one of the biggest signs of growing fluency.
Shadowing also helps learners become more comfortable with different accents and speaking styles, especially when they use varied but understandable audio.
This flexibility is important in the real world, where English sounds different depending on the speaker, context, and situation.
Over time, learners stop focusing so much on how they sound and start focusing more on what they want to say.
When that happens, communication becomes more natural and enjoyable because the focus shifts from fear to expression.
It's important to remember that everyone's progress speed is different. Shadowing is not about comparing yourself to others.
It's about becoming more comfortable and confident than you were yesterday, step by step.
If learners commit to shadowing as a daily habit, they often find that English slowly becomes part of their routine rather than a stressful task.
And when a language becomes part of your routine, improvement happens naturally without constant pressure or self-criticism.
Shadowing teaches learners to stay present in English instead of escaping back to their native language when things feel difficult.
That ability to stay present is essential for real conversations, where thinking too much can break the flow.
Over time, learners who shadow regularly begin to trust their instincts more and their fears less.
And that trust allows them to speak more freely, even when they know their English is not perfect yet.
This is why shadowing is not just about language, but also about confidence and mindset.
When learners stop fearing mistakes and start focusing on communication, progress becomes steady and sustainable.
If you continue practicing shadowing with patience and consistency, you will likely notice that speaking English becomes less of a challenge and more of a habit.
And when English becomes a habit rather than a challenge, you are no longer forcing fluency. You are allowing it to grow naturally through daily use and calm repetition.